Happy Monday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You can tell it's Georgia-Alabama week. You can tell that Georgia's coming off a big win against Tennessee, and you can tell those lousy, stinking Gators took a loss because when I start the show, I'm too loud. Connor goes scrambling to turn the microphone down. You can tell it's that kind of week if they're already trying to turn the mic down on me. We haven't even gotten going yet. We are fully loaded today all week long. It's John Stinchcomb coming up. Marlow's Tavern Insider Update with him. We'll break down a lot of what went right and some of what went wrong for Georgia against Tennessee. Some of that with John today going to involve the offensive line. We will start the look ahead to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Plenty on Tennessee, but you got to get going here with the big one on Saturday. We'll do some of that. There is a record that must be corrected in terms of what I would say is a ludicrous level of hype from the media that gets it wrong when it comes to Bama and Georgia coming up on Saturday. We'll tell you about that off the top. We got so much to do. I'm legitimately nervous about whether or not we're going to get it all in, but we'll do our best. You can judge us when it's over with. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We've got so much on Georgia's game from Saturday against Tennessee. It'll be sprinkled throughout the program. There is, though, one thing I want to begin with, and I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but there's one thing I want to do off the top of the show today that I feel like must be done, because we're obviously heading towards Georgia and Alabama coming up on Saturday. We know how big of a game that is. We want to start paying close attention to that right here in the very early going of the week. And when it comes to national media storyline for this game on Saturday, the one thing that you know that you're going to be hearing a lot about is, and you saw it again on Saturday when Nick Saban beat his former offensive coordinator, Lane Kiffin, the notion that Nick Saban has never lost to one of his assistant coaches. I saw what ESPN put out on Twitter. It was SportsCenter that tweeted this, and some of the other ESPN accounts kind of retweeted it after the game in which Saban goes 21. You know, listen to what SportsCenter says on Twitter. Nick Saban's former assistants can't touch him. And they're obviously referencing the game there against Ole Miss. Look, it is obviously true. The graphic on the screen is not incorrect. Nick Saban is 21-0 against former assistants. And on one hand, the fact that that's true would seemingly make a lot of sense. I mean, think about the kind of program that would typically hire a former Nick Saban assistant. It's a program bad enough they need a new coach, and unimaginative enough that the only thing they can conjure up is, well, let's go grab one of Nick Saban's former assistants. For most programs who, are kind of forced to make a coaching hire, the fact that Nick Saban beats up on those programs, I think it says more about the program itself than the coach that was hired. However, here's the one thing that you should understand. This notion that no Nick Saban assistant has ever gotten from underneath his shadow, that Nick Saban knows all the tricks that are needed to go out and play a game like this, and Nick Saban knows more about that assistant than that assistant could ever know about him. That is just fundamentally untrue. Now, I know many of you, especially some of the Alabama fans who like to tune in and check out what the other side is thinking, I know that you may think this is just sort of a homerish Georgia take. So as a way of maybe kind of like pushing back against that, let me begin with a quick point that's got nothing to do with Georgia. The notion that no former Saban assistant has ever gotten out of his shadow. What did former offensive coordinator Jimbo Fisher do in 2013? He won the national championship. And on the list of great teams this century, the Seminoles of 2013 would be on that list. Now, it is fair to say that when Jimbo Fisher was head coach at Florida State in 2013, when they were winning a national championship, he didn't have to beat Alabama head-to-head to win that national championship. But part of the reason why Jimbo Fisher didn't win that national championship is because when you got to what was then the BCS, Alabama was nowhere to be found. Alabama was chasing down Auburn kick returner during the kick six game, getting embarrassed. Was it Oklahoma they got embarrassed by in that year's Sugar Bowl? Getting embarrassed there in that game. Alabama was nowhere to be found that year. Jimbo Fisher couldn't beat Alabama head-to-head because Alabama didn't qualify for the national championship game that year to be able to do that. Now you say, well, Jimbo Fisher couldn't keep the magic going there at Florida State, and that's probably true. But look what happened this past Saturday. Jimbo Fisher got a big win over a highly ranked Florida team, and by the way, you better believe we'll get there before we're done on today's show. Florida State may be on the verge of going winless here this season. I think that Jimbo Fisher's doing just fine absent Florida State. Florida State seems to be the program that's had some trouble. But the point here is that Jimbo Fisher proves that assistant coaches have gotten out of Nick Saban's shadow in the past and actually had more success than Nick Saban has had. Jimbo Fisher was a national champion in 2013 in a year in which Alabama could not get the job done, which, if you're doing the math in your head, obviously brings us to Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart has not beaten Nick Saban head-to-head yet, and the couple of losses that he suffered to Alabama have been painful ones. 2017 national championship game, 2018 SEC championship game. But this idea that somehow Kirby Smart just sort of exists still very much in the shadow of Nick Saban, I can tell you that's also fundamentally untrue there as well, to say nothing of the fact that Kirby Smart's gone head-to-head with Nick Saban in recruiting won plenty of those battles, number one class in the country according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking in 2 out of the last 3 years. He's doing just fine as far as all that's concerned. And also, much the same way that Jimbo Fisher with his best team didn't get a chance to beat Nick Saban head-to-head because when it came time to play for that championship, Alabama was nowhere to be found. Georgia's found itself kind of in the same situation. One of the main reasons why Georgia hasn't beaten Nick Saban head-to-head yet is because of a lack of opportunity in some respects. Georgia's won the SEC East the last 3 years, but has only gotten to play Alabama once in the SEC championship game because Alabama's only qualified for that game once in the last 3 years. So this idea of, Kirby Smart still exists in Nick Saban's shadow, with Georgia going to the title game every single year, Alabama only doing it once over the course of the last 3 years, I would suggest that isn't quite true. In Georgia's SEC championship year of 2017, Georgia didn't get to beat Alabama head-to-head because Alabama didn't qualify for the game. What did Georgia do instead? Beat the team that had beaten Alabama 28-7. So listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. At some point in time, Kirby Smart does have to beat Nick Saban. Many Georgia fans believe it may be this Saturday. We'll find out in just a few days' time. But for all the people who push the narrative of, these assistant coaches who haven't beaten Saban yet, they live in his shadow, I don't think that right now Kirby Smart lives in anyone's shadow. I think that Kirby is just as much of a thorn in Nick Saban's side as the fact that Saban is a thorn in Georgia and Kirby Smart's side. So at some point in time, the head-to-head win needs to come. But the fact that it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that Kirby Smart still exists in any kind of role underneath Nick Saban. That's just simply untrue. Let me shift gears now and speak about this. Obviously, the game coming up on Saturday is a gigantic one. And I thought it was really interesting that the guy who called Georgia's game this past Saturday, Brad Nessler from CBS, and will also call this Saturday night's game against Alabama, when we had him on the show on Thursday, I thought he was very honest about something that is just obviously true. I asked him, I said, when you look ahead 2 Saturdays from now about what's going to go down against Georgia and the Crimson Tide, have you seen enough from Georgia to believe that Georgia's ready to go out there and win that game? Or do you need to see more from Tennessee to feel confident about that? And Brad Nessler, I thought, gave what was a very honest answer. Here is Brad Nessler on that topic.
I think I have to see Saturday. I wasn't impressed in week one, neither were the Georgia fans with how they played. Last week, I was like, wow. I watched the whole game on my way home from Tuscaloosa, and I couldn't believe how good Georgia's defense was. I mean, I knew it last year, but they got deeper and they got better. And, when you prepare and you look down and you go, well, I'm going to have 11 guys here. I've got like 22 guys or more that Georgia runs through defensively, and they really don't lose anything when they put one guy in for another. So I knew their defense was going to be supreme. It is. And they stopped Mac Jones and his 3 receivers and Najee Harris. And I don't know. But if they shut Tennessee down and, Tennessee ran all over Missouri, but I don't see them running all over Georgia to 230 yards on the ground. If that happens, then there's sense Georgia's defense. If they, shut down Tennessee like they did Auburn, then I think there's a really good chance that it's not going to be a high-scoring game in Alabama. I think it'll be a rock fight, basically.
So I think it's really honest from Brad Nessler. He says, I want to see if this Georgia defense can go out there and shut down another team. Well, on Saturday, that's exactly what Georgia did. Georgia went out and to a high degree made life miserable on the Tennessee offense. And this hype-vaunted Tennessee offensive line was essentially humiliated between the hedges on Saturday. The Georgia defense proved to be as advertised. But if you're using the Tennessee game as a barometer for how ready is how ready Georgia is for this game coming up Saturday night against Alabama. I think it's fair to say that you might have some questions on the other side of the ball. Georgia is a great defense. I don't think it's any argument at all. Simply put, the best defense in college football by a wide margin. But is the offense good enough? Many Georgia fans are asking that. It sounds like on the heels of the game on Saturday, Kirby Smart's also asking that too. Here is Kirby.
I don't think we execute well right now offensively. We have everybody playing in a new offense, but we have several freshmen trying to get experience, and they make mistakes, but they make plays. Jermaine Burton makes a bonehead mistake today, but then he turns around and has a 43-yard run. So, I mean, we're trying to develop explosiveness, execution at a high level, and hey, maybe you give Tennessee some credit too, because I think they played to not give up big plays in the game, and they did that.
Kirby right there says they're trying to develop some explosiveness right now. They probably don't have enough of that offensively. Maybe that shows up on Saturday against an Alabama defense that was pretty bad against Ole Miss. Maybe it doesn't. I know for some people they're highlighting what's going on with the Georgia running game here right now, where it seems like Zamir White kind of left something to be desired. James Cook didn't play on Saturday. In some flashes, Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton seem like they might be pretty interesting prospects here to maybe see more of. Here's the only thing I'll say as a way of kind of wrapping this up in terms of what Georgia showed against Tennessee as a preview for what it'll be able to do against Alabama. I wouldn't make too much about the pecking order at running back right now and the lack of explosive plays that are going on there. At some point in time, the offense needs to be better. It needs to be more explosive. But for the people who are saying, hey, let's stop playing Zamir White as much because you need to play Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh more, I would be really careful with that. There were also people saying after the Arkansas game they didn't want to see any more of James Cook, and when Cook was healthy at the beginning of the Auburn game last week, he looked really, really good. All of a sudden, the people who tried to rush him off the field may have been making a mistake. The same thing could be true, for Zamir White here as well, who admittedly did not play a great game against Tennessee on Saturday. And I'm like everybody else, would love to see more from Kenny McIntosh, would love to see more from Kendall Milton. But the pressure of trying to decide which running back is in the game at any time is probably just not quite as high as sometimes the average fan wants to make it be. I mean, if you want to go back and look at the Kirby Smart track record of Georgia, in 2018, Georgia gave two running backs essentially the same number of carries. DeAndre Swift, Elijah Holyfield were within like 4 carries of each other there that year. Georgia has kind of found a way to use multiple running backs. Before that, in 2017, there was a little bit more of a discrepancy between Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. Chubb had 223 totes. Sony Michel just had 156, but averaged out over the course of a 15-game season, which Georgia played that year. That's only a difference of about 4 carries a game. 2019 is really the only outlier year in which Georgia did not get a lot of running backs heavily involved in the game. So right now, I would say that Georgia is still trying to figure out its running back pecking order. The good news is there are a lot of options. The bad news is someone from that group needs to find some explosiveness. Thus far, that hasn't quite happened. But, Kirby Smart's going to use these guys in kind of a rotational situation. Georgia's got a lot of good, if not quite anyone great yet, who's emerged. So I would be really careful about being too panicky about the situation with the Georgia offense, too panicky about the situation with the Georgia running game in particular. We'll talk more to John Stinchcomb about this in a moment. And I would say when it comes to the kind of formula on both sides of the ball that leads to a possibility of a win against Alabama on Saturday, this is about as good as anyone can hope for. Georgia's in a pretty good spot here. Tough opponent. No one can deny that. But after 3 games, there's a lot more to like about Georgia than there is to be concerned about. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Pella Window and Door, and good to have you with us. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Radio Noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. As I said a moment ago, we'll get John Stinchcomb coming up as a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. Before that, though, let me give a shout-out to my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making this all possible here today. They can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That matters. That's one of those things that can really save you money or make you some money. Think about how better windows, better better doors looks in terms of the curb appeal of your home, the outside aesthetic of that. That could increase the resale value when you go to sell it. Or in this time of year in which, you've had the air conditioning going, maybe we're about to switch over and start having some of that heat running. You want to keep that energy inside your house. Better windows, better doors, efficient windows and doors help keep that energy on the inside, which could save you money when it comes to your bills there as well. Pella Window and Door of Georgia also has a lot of different ways for you to have that initial consultation with them. You can have the in-person meeting. If you want to do it through video, you can do that as well. And they've got a great deal for you also. This is good to know here from our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Between now and November 12th, you can get 50% off qualifying installations or no payments, no interest for 12 months. Pella also offers great warranties and unparalleled expertise when it comes to the folks who are doing the installation for you. So a couple different ways for you to get in touch. Check them out online, pellabranch.com. That's pellabranch.com, or you can give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. Okay, I want to do more on the Georgia offense before we bring on John Stinchcomb here, and I want to do this as we go around the doghouse here, assisted today by AAA. So what I said about the running game a moment ago, lack of explosive runs, but Georgia's still got a pretty deep pecking order of running backs, and I would say that the competition for those guys is ongoing. But it's not like quarterback where you just got to choose one guy. Georgia's going to have multiple running backs in the game. Kirby Smart has been pretty good about kind of giving those carries out to multiple guys over the years. So over the course of the season, and some of that's going to happen this Saturday against Alabama, someone's going to emerge. Handful of guys are going to emerge. This may not be a great offense here this year, but good may be good enough when you think about pairing that with this great Georgia defense. Same thing on the other side of the ball here as well, or I should say in the other spot on offense that gets some attention at quarterback right now. I think through the last couple of weeks, and if you want to add the second half of the game against Arkansas, Stetson Bennett's really been doing his job. He was 9.6 yards per attempt against Auburn. He was like 8.8 against Tennessee. Those are big numbers against pretty good teams. Auburn still ranked in the top 15. Tennessee came into the game, ranked in a similar position. And I thought Stetson Bennett really did his job. Is he playing at the highest level of anybody in college football right now? The highest level of anybody in the SEC? Maybe not, but is he getting the job done and helping this Georgia offense be efficient? I would say so. This is what Kirby Smart said by way of evaluation about Stetson Bennett after the game on Saturday.
He understands coverage, so he knows where he's supposed to go with the ball, and he can work it across. Very similar to Jake. He got to watch Jake do that. Jake was really elite at that. So those things, he is advanced at that. I think the little things of changing the protection, looking at what play, somebody disguising the coverage well. I mean, he's growing in regards to the way he handles that. He can't hold the ball for a long time. When we're in certain protections, he can't hold the ball. He held the ball kind of early on one of the third downs. I think we took a sack on it, but he's got to protect the ball. That's a big part for him, is giving our defense a chance to go out there and play by protecting it. But I am proud of his growth. I'm proud of his execution, his ability to get us lined up and distribute the ball. I mean, the one thing he's done is spray it around a little bit.
I know I'm going a little bit long in this segment, but let me just take a moment to say it this way. I think sometimes college football fans understand two far different ends of an extreme. They understand greatest player in the country, heap praise on type player. And they also understand the other end of that extreme, which is, hey, this is a player who may not be getting the job done, who a team might be looking to replace. But most of college football, certainly in the SEC, most of the SEC kind of exist in between those two extremes. Not necessarily all-American type player, not necessarily player that's looking to be replaced by the team that he's playing on. Sometimes good is just good enough. And for Georgia right now, when you think about where the offense was at the end of last season, it was decidedly not good. There probably were some players in this offense a year ago that were at least the consideration of maybe replacing them. You certainly needed more than you were getting. This was an offense that really struggled, that really scuffled. This season thus far, Georgia's at least been better than it was a year ago. Is it as great, as explosive as some of the other offenses in the SEC? Right now, I would say decidedly it's not. There are other offenses who are playing at a higher level. But can good be enough when you have a defense that's as great as Georgia's is? With the way this defense is playing right now, the Georgia offense may just be good enough to get it done. Obviously, on Saturday, another big test there in that regard. It's around the doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And one of the things that I love about AAA is not only can they save you worry, add to your peace of mind when you become a AAA member, they can also save you some money there as well. One of the ways they do that is with the AAA Savings Hack Pack. It's a great benefit for you for becoming a AAA member. It includes free career assistance, identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, and, of course, discounts in foods and essentials when you're on the road, as I expect to be coming up here this weekend. The Hack Pack is a part of every single AAA membership. So to find out more about this, go to AAA.com/go savings. That's AAA.com/go savings. By the way, speaking of that Georgia defense, we're going to talk about them a little bit more in today's show. But for now, on some of the other stuff around the Georgia offense, including what you saw from the Georgia offensive line on Saturday against the Vols, let's talk to John Stinchcomb right now as a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to John Stinchcomb here as a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. Of course, John, like everybody else, watching the game against Tennessee on Saturday. And, John, as we begin our conversation here today, I want to kind of ask you the same question I asked CBS Sports' Brad Nessler when he joined us on Thursday. I asked him then, going into the game against Tennessee, what do you need to see from this game to know if Georgia's ready for Alabama? Slightly different version for you because you have now seen the game. Did you see enough for the Dog against the Vols to believe that Georgia is ready for this very stiff test it faces on the road coming up this Saturday?
Yes, and I think it's twofold. One, I like what I saw out of Georgia and the resilience and the bounce back from some early adversity. And two, I watched the Alabama game. So they're not this elite force that they have been in the past. Their defense is suspect at best. In contrast, you look at Georgia's performance, and yes, they allowed 21 points from Tennessee, but how did those 21 points come?
Right.
The first was out of the offense with a botched snap, and you took a bad situation and made it worse and gave them 7 points. And then Grantano dropped a dime in the corner over DJ Daniels. We fail on a fourth down attempt, and he drops another dime. It took two really impressive throws to put points on the board from their offense. Our defense plays at such a high level that I think it as long as you don't turn the ball over, which Georgia did early, we've got a chance against just about anybody we face.
What did you think of the Georgia offensive line on Saturday? There's obviously the high-profile bad snap on Trey Hill. I would say that one of the things that might prevent them from considering a position switch with Hill right now is the fact that Ben Cleveland's playing at such a high level at the right guard spot that maybe they don't want to move him out of that spot, and maybe they want to keep Hill at center because of that, but obviously you can't have the bad snaps like you had at the beginning of the game. It seems like they're also at least still pondering the notion of a personnel switch on the tackle spots. I know that Jamari Salyer, I believe, briefly played the right tackle spot. Xavier Truss briefly came into the game maybe at left tackle, so they're at least still considering some stuff there. What did you make of the way the offensive line played? And I guess at the moment what might still seem like a little bit of a work in progress to determine who the top five really are here.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think there was a little bit of a drop-off in the performance from Auburn to Tennessee in week 2 to week 3. It's still not a highly functioning group yet. Well, that's probably what we should have expected coming into this season, understanding the turnover and new placement, and I still think they're trying to figure out that combination of top five. Now, where McClendon came in at right tackle and played, I thought, really well against Auburn, he had a little more challenge against that Tennessee front, and he was not alone. I think the offensive line just didn't have that level of execution, and I can't single out one single guy. I know I mentioned McClendon, but it was across the board where it wasn't as much of a blown assignment I thought it was more a lack of execution where, the Tennessee front seven was winning more than the Auburn front seven did. So we're getting the hats in the right places. It's just we're not winning those battles or didn't as much as we saw against Auburn. So a slight drop off there. But, I think it's a talented group. I think there's going to be some growth in this group as the season goes along. And this past week was no different, where you saw some really good, but also, this isn't a perfected bunch yet.
Yeah, I think that theme kind of works for the offense all the way around. I talked about this before you came on the show, that I think right now the Georgia offense is good, probably not great. Good is still an upgrade over where I believe this unit was a year ago. There's going to be a little hand-wringing over the fact that you're not seeing a ton of explosive runs, and right now the true dominant running back from this group probably hasn't stepped up and emerged as of yet. I'm not too worried about that. Kirby's going to give multiple, carries to multiple running backs. That's kind of always been his thing. I think Stetson Bennett right now is about 6th in the SEC in yards per attempt, so I think he's playing well. I don't think he's playing, as explosive and dial a score as, probably, a couple of the other quarterbacks in this league are doing right now, but I think sometimes good can be good enough. Georgia's going to have to make plays offensively to win against Alabama on Saturday, but I guess I don't find myself too panicked about the Georgia offense right now, even though I thought this group was really deficient a season ago. What do you make about, I guess, the offense overall?
I think Georgia's offense has to be more than just a we can't turn it over offense. And I think they are. I just don't think they're at that dominant point where, you watch some of these other teams and it feels like, man, they can't be slowed down yet. Well, obviously Georgia is not there. I still think they're developing identity. I like the diversity that you saw in play calling and the ways that they're attacking. With Stetson, he doesn't have that go-to guy. I think that Kyrus Jackson and Burton have really stepped up and given this offense a few more weapons that defenses have to be cognizant of, and we have yet to see that George Pickens take over games. So he's capable of it. We just haven't seen it yet, and that's not. I wouldn't put all that burden on his shoulders. I think part of it is Stetson's strength, which is, I think he's accurate. I think he's a fairly good decision maker, and he's got a decisive nature where if he sees somebody across the middle, he's going to pull the trigger and put it where it needs to be. He's not quite the deep ball threat or sideline ace that would probably lend itself better to George Pickens being able to take over a game. But I don't know if that's what this Georgia offense has to be. I also think with these running backs, yes, there's going to be a rotation, but I think throughout this season we'll see a little bit of a shift to where either McIntosh or Milton become the go-to guy, and it's more of a situational role play. I know that's stepping out on a limb just a little bit, but not much, judging on what we've seen, especially as this season has progressed and what we saw more of against Tennessee.
So let me do two quick things on George Pickens since you bring him up. And please understand that I'm not saying that George Pickens is the next Randy Moss, but when you look at Randy Moss's career, this is not a guy that's catching 10 balls a game. He may catch a couple of them, but they're both going to go for touchdowns, or one's going to be for 75 yards, or in the NFL, he's going to get a big pass interference, which is the same thing as a big completion at that level. It's one of those guys that when you get a chance to throw it to him, you just have to make sure you maximize that productivity. I think that Pickens is in a similar spot for Georgia where, he's not going to be like Kyrus Jackson, maybe catch 7 or 8 balls. Defenses are just going to work hard to take Pickens away from Georgia. On this show a million times, I kind of predicted that before the season began, that there'd be a lot of coverage shaded his way. It's one of the reasons why I didn't mind Georgia forcing it, attempting to force it to Pickens on Saturday, even though it was nearly an interception. Sometimes you have to do that. But it is one of those things where I think that when you do have a chance to maximize the throw to Pickens, touchdown the Arkansas game, touchdown the Auburn game, you need to make sure it goes for 6. You need to make sure it goes for that big gainer here. You can't completely ignore him. But also, this is one of those guys the defenses are going to work really hard to make sure you're not throwing it to him 10 times a game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you got to call his number and design plays that are geared towards him. You don't want to handcuff a quarterback and say, hey, throw it here. But there are plays that you design, that you call, that you're expecting certain coverage. You can read it before the ball is even snapped, that most likely this is where the ball is going to go, and give the quarterback the freedom, if it's not there, work through your progression. But it starts with, let's call up a play that should go to George Pickens. I think, obviously other teams are doing that. That's what you see between the two Kyles in Florida.
Yeah.
They're calling plays to get Pitts the ball. Now, if it's not there, obviously Trask is making different decisions, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because every defense that faces Florida at this point knows when they get in the red zone, it's going to Pitts. Well, I think Georgia has an opportunity to kind of not be quite as predictable, but still have that same mindset going into certain situations where we're going to call the number of George Pickens and have faith in the fact that he is an elite receiver and will make us right more often than he's going to miss, even if it's not the ideal situation, just because he's such an amazing playmaker.
Let me say one more thing about Pickens, too, John. I'm a huge fan of his. I have found myself on this show defending him a lot when some people have maybe been unhappy about something that he's done. The honest truth is, I'm not scandalized by rambunctious behavior. I'm not going to, clutch pearls when, Pickens is maybe a little aggressive after the whistle every now and then. I like competitive fire. But, John, I will say that great players are not silly. And, the squirting of the water bottle thing is kind of funny now that Georgia won the game. But in the midst of a competitive game, I can't have my superstar squirting water bottles on the sideline. That's not a good look for George Pickens.
Kirby's right. It's just silly. Come on, man. Is this really what we're doing here? This is where we're at. But, if that's our biggest concern, I think the problem is it puts me over team, right? That's why everyone who comes down on Pickens is saying, oh, he's selfish. Oh, he's not thinking about the fact that, man, 15 yards that's important. That can put a team in field goal range or continue a drive that otherwise had stopped, or vice versa. I mean, he's obviously it's going to affect the offense when he's on the field. I can't believe that he was able to get a 15-yard penalty with the defense on the field, but he found a way.
Right. I think Georgia had 3 guys get personal fouls on Saturday that weren't in the game. That's not good.
Oh, it's unreal. Hopefully that's not a recurring theme. But you talk about unique stuff. I think the issue is there a discipline issue? No, not on the whole. I think it's just Pickens is a guy that is passionate, shall we say. This mistake had nothing to do with passion. That's just silly and selfish.
Yeah.
So, I'm not really worked up over it. I don't think it's going to be a long-term issue. I think when you look at some of these 15-yard penalties, though, you got to say, guys, we're not going to put up with any of this crap because it hurts the team, and usually it's because you're being selfish.
It is the Marlow's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb. I want to talk to John about the Georgia defense here in a moment. Before that, at Marlow's, hunger's never on the menu. People love getting fed good food there. Well, there's also a great opportunity right now in the month of October to also contribute to the end of hunger, or really around our communities here. When you make a contribution to No Kid Hungry when you're at a Marlow's Tavern right now, they're going to give you $5 off a future visit to Marlow's Tavern. This is a really cool thing that Marlow's does. No Kid Hungry is a very important organization. Marlow's doing great work with them, and you have a chance to be a part of that right now. Go by Marlow's Tavern when you're enjoying your meal. Make a donation to No Kid Hungry, and then you get $5 off a future visit there to Marlow's Tavern for either in-person dining, or if you still want to do the to-go stuff, Marlow's Tavern can take good care of you on either one of those fronts there. So find the Marlow's Tavern there in your neighborhood. And, of course, it's always fun to talk about Marlow's Tavern here as a part of our Marlow's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb every Monday on our program. John, I don't have anything super sophisticated to say about this Georgia defense. It is a blast to watch right now. I think it is far superior through 3 games than the defense was a year ago, even though that defense was exceptional. This defense is aggressive. You got outside linebackers, and Georgia just sends them in waves. You got outside linebackers beating offensive tackles, including maybe a tackle that you and I know a little something about here from this past Saturday. Won't get into it much more specific than that. This was such a dominant performance. This defense is, I've got to imagine it keeps opposing offensive coordinators up at night. I think it's a blast to watch right now. They are just a highlight reel, one play after another.
Yes, and I think Tennessee's offensive front is one of the better groups that the SEC has to offer this year. It's not 5 across the board total studs, but man, that's a good group. I want to give Tennessee some credit there, and Georgia's front owned them, especially -1 rushing yards at the end of the fourth quarter and the second half. You just think, man, what a dominant performance. And everything that we talked about this offseason, BA, of, are they going to be able to affect the passer? Is there one area of the game that you want to see improved? And that's, sacks and getting in that backfield and affecting. Man, have they done that with some great success. So you have to love the way Azeez Ojulari's playing right now, and Adam Anderson has been effective in the backfield, and it's come from a number of places. So I'm really impressed and encouraged by this defense, and I think as long as Georgia's able to limit their turnovers and not hand away points, teams are going to really get frustrated and struggle because this defensive group is elite.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long because I've got a couple other things I need to do with you before we get ready to say goodbye, but I do want to follow up on this because I have wondered if even a great Georgia defense would be good enough to stop a great offense. We've seen some examples of this in recent years where it wasn't true. You gave up 37 to LSU a year ago, gave up 35 to Alabama in 2018. I would say the Auburn team in 2017 was at least good offensively, if not quite as great as the two other offenses I just mentioned. Georgia gave up 40 to them on the road. John, I don't yet know what's going to happen on Saturday against a very good Alabama offense and this Georgia defense, but this Georgia defense, I believe, currently is so much better set up for a competition like this because they're not just staying back in coverage and trying to limit big plays. They're not just trying to keep contain and make sure that nobody bust through for a big play. They are pinning their ears back and they are hunting. John, they're hunting on every single play right now. This impactful defense has a chance to do something to an elite offense that I'm not quite sure last year's defense for Georgia, as statistically good as it was, I just don't know they had enough teeth when they really needed to. I've had people on Twitter this week saying this ought to be called the Junkyard Dogs defense again. I think so. I mean, this defense is really showing some teeth right now, and it does make me a lot more hopeful about a matchup with what I think is a very good Alabama offense. The way this defense is playing right now makes me a lot more hopeful because they aren't just conservative trying to limit the plays. They're trying to make their own big play.
Admittedly, I have a Georgia bias, but given the two teams right now, the way they're playing, I hands down would prefer this Georgia team over Alabama's. And I think it's because of this elite defense. The way they are, I love it. I love the term hunting. Man, they are getting after it. They're aggressive. They're affecting, part of the problem last year against LSU is, one, you had the best quarterback in college football surrounded by elite talent, and he was able to sit back there and survey the field and just pick and choose where he wanted to take his shots. I don't think that same opportunity exists for quarterbacks facing this Georgia defense this year. I think the improvement off the edges is obvious to anyone who watches these games, and that interior defensive line has only added talent and experience, and I mean, it's just an impressive group. That gives these defensive backs that are, most of these guys are 1 year more experienced than they were coming into that 2019 season, more opportunities to make plays, and they don't have to cover guys for 6-7 seconds. That's almost impossible when you get up against these elite offenses, and somebody's going to shake loose after a period of time that's extended. So that's what I think the major difference is from the 2019 season to this 2020 season is across the board. You have more experience, A, and B, just the pressure that they're applying to these quarterbacks is limiting the amount of surveying being done from the quarterback position where they can progress through their reads and extend plays. Those opportunities aren't existing right now.
All right, before we're done, I have to mention the fact that your name came up this week around a pretty cool statistical factoid involving Georgia football. So before we're done, I want to make sure we mention this. It sounds like you already know what it is. Before that, though, John, each and every year, one of the really fun things to kind of get the season started is the countdown to kickoff event that you and your brother and your family foundation kind of been a part of. Obviously, this year that's made a little bit more challenging because people are respecting social distancing, things like that, and yet the opportunity to raise money for a great cause, the opportunity for Georgia fans to get involved still continues here. I know there's a few days left to kind of get involved with the online auction here for that. Would you mind just giving that a quick shout out? Tell us what it raises money for and also how people can kind of get involved with that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up, BA, because it's something that's near and dear to our hearts and there's so many dog fans, and our Dogs for Kids event have changed over the years. We once did the countdown to kickoff with the fan interactions on the field, and that since has changed. But we have continued to raise money for the Georgia Transplant Foundation as well as Children's Health Care of Atlanta. Two very worthy charities, and because of the pandemic and just the challenges of having large group gatherings, we weren't able to do an event, but we still want to raise money for these charities because there are still sick kids in this world and still so many folks that need organ transplants and the support to come along with for those transplants to be successful. And so once again, we want to raise money for these kids that need it. And we're inviting everyone to participate this year in a different format by joining us in our live auction, which it's online. You can check out some pretty cool stuff. There's golf with the Butlers, Drew and Kevin. There's some other signed memorabilia, and really it's just ways of getting a cool receipt for making a donation to these charities, and in return, you get to claim a couple pretty cool items that should appeal to a lot of Georgia folks. So we would love for people to participate. It's a great way to support kids that really need it, and check it out. There's a number of links online, but if they want to go to countdown to UGAKickoff.com, they can find that link there, and Qtego.net/Dogs for Kids. It's a little bit long, but there's a couple different ways where people can check out the auction.
And what I'll do is I'll put a link to both those sites when I post the show at DawgNation.com. So for video folks, radio folks, or folks who just access the podcast a different way, hit up the post today at DawgNation.com. I'll put a link to how you can get more, and it really is a cool online auction with a lot of really great experiences and items, memorabilia for those of you that love Georgia football. This is good stuff. All right, let's finish with this, and I know I've kept you 1,000 years here, but I saw this stat on the heels of Jalen Carter getting in and scoring a touchdown, a reception in the jumbo set. By the way, good day for Georgia linemen in terms of catching passes because Andrew Thomas also caught a 2-point conversion in the NFL yesterday. I think he'd actually been working on that during practice. Some video had been released, so that's kind of cool to see. But Jason Starrett puts this out on Twitter on the heels of the Carter touchdown. The Georgia defensive end Jalen Carter, 305 pounds, caught a touchdown pass in Saturday's win versus Tennessee. Carter appears to be the first 300-pounder to score a touchdown for Georgia since John Stinchcomb did so on a 1-yard rush at Auburn on November 16th, 2002. Now, John, it just so happens that you brought up your touchdown on our Dog Nation Happy Hour show a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the 2002 Georgia-Auburn game. So we were just talking about this the other day. So I have to ask you, is it cool to have another big guy join you in the 300-pound club here in terms of touchdowns? Or are you disappointed now that you're not the most recent?
No, it is great, and it's laughable because both Jalen Carter's touchdown and Andrew Thomas' touchdown are much more impressive than mine. I appreciate the listing of my touchdown as a 1-yard rush because those that remember the play, and plenty of my friends and family do, as they have harassed me relentlessly since this tweet has gone out because. And Nick Jones is another offensive lineman that scored a touchdown in between those two. But it was fun. I enjoy it. I appreciate being associated with a play that was very athletic and impressive on Jalen Carter's behalf, and brings back some fond memories with some special friends as we won that game in Auburn, and I was grateful to still have a ball in a case that happened to be the one that I was able to score a touchdown with in an SEC game. So it's a fun memory, and I appreciate the association with a guy who made a much more athletic play than I did to score a touchdown.
But as a way of wrapping up this conversation, we should also point out that while you played the game at 300 pounds, here in your post-playing career, you are far from 300 pounds now. You're a picture of pristine physical condition. So congratulations to you for scoring a touchdown as a 300-pounder, and I guess congratulations for leaving the 300-pound club well in the rearview mirror here in your post-playing career.
Well, I'm trying to stick around. I'm trying to eat all the good food at Marlow's, but not 2 or 3 plates of it at a time. I'm able to enjoy their tacos without having to order, a burger to follow it and a rack of ribs with it as well. So,
yeah, you're gonna have to give me a clue on how to do that at some point. Yeah, that's good stuff. John, thanks for being here as part of our Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. We certainly appreciate that, and we'll look forward to catching up with you later on this week for the Dog Nation Happy Hour, and of course, plenty more Georgia-Alabama talk on the way. So thanks so much.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, BA. Go Dog.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
We have like some time benchmarks in place because people don't have just like an endless array of time to listen to podcasts, and obviously we have radio and stuff like that. For some reason, in the last few days, we've just completely blown through those, so I apologize for all of that. But we got a lot to do to get ready for the Dogs and the Tide coming up on Saturday. But brief detour here for a moment because of our SEC Through. And to be completely honest with you, there's certain things about me that I'm not very proud of. This is one of those things. I take spiteful glee in bad things happening to, like, let's say, Dan Mullen, the Florida Gators. Saturday was an example of that. It is really amazing to see. First of all, people give a lot of attention to Mullen blaming the loss on the crowd at Kyle Field. Now he wants 90-something thousand people at the Swamp. Honesty compels me to admit they couldn't even sell all of their social distancing tickets to their home opener. The idea that they are now going to get 90,000 people after a loss when they couldn't get 17,000 people in the stadium with everybody in the media telling them they're going to win the national championship. I think if Mullen did try to sell the place out, I think he'd be disappointed by the results. But here's the other thing, and it's amazing how the spin on all of this continues for Florida after, having lost Texas A&M on Saturday. Obviously the Florida defense is wretched. They've given up more than 100 points over the course of the first 3 games of the season. And yet even in the midst of that, there's this narrative of, well, my gosh, this shows you just how great the Florida offense is. They still have a chance to win a game like that on Saturday with the defense playing as bad as it did. Listen, you'll get no beef from me on the Florida defense being bad. We've been telling you that for a while. That's one of the reasons why we laughed at some of the national media stuff like Yahoo.com and people like that who were kind of calling this a throwback to the Steve Spurrier age before the game against Texas A&M on Saturday, to say nothing of Brenton Cox thinking he was already kind of looking ahead to the game against Georgia. We kind of laughed at that too. We knew this Florida defense was a problem. But if the only thing that you think you saw in Kyle Field on Saturday was great Florida offense upended by a bad Florida defense and Todd Grantham, you have missed part of the story. And for some reason, the people who are just so invested in Dan Mullen as coaching genius, the one thing they don't quite seem to see is one of the things that could have helped out the Florida defense just a little bit on Saturday is if Florida could run the ball even a little bit. They had 90 yards on the ground, somewhere around that total, less than 3 yards, I think, per attempt, completely outmanned and outgunned in the rushing game category by Texas A&M, a program, by the way, that's had a problem with that over the course of the last couple of years. But Texas A&M found a running game on Saturday. Florida could not find that running game. So if the only thing you think you know about Florida Texas A&M was the bad Florida defense costing them the game, take a gander over there on that offensive side of the ball for Florida a little bit too, and take a notice at what Florida's not doing running the football. As I said before, I don't certainly take any pleasure in defending the legacy of Steve Spurrier. That's not what I ever want to be accused of doing. But the best of the Spurrier years always featured Bob Stoops' defense, guys like Fred Taylor running the football. Dan Mullen is not a Steve Spurrier clone, and I think by now we've made our point on that pretty clear. Let me also say this about Texas A&M. Obviously, I'm a believer in Jimbo Fisher as a coach. I've said that many times before. We've kind of gone round and round with some of our audience on that. Ugly win versus Vanderbilt, bad loss against Alabama, now you've beaten Florida. As the saying goes, they don't ask you how, they just ask you how many. Through a pretty interesting stretch to start the year, Texas A&M is now 2-1, and the schedule is about to get very, very easy, much easier for A&M than it has been because of the fact that right now teams like LSU and Auburn don't look to be very good. A&M things start to open up for the Aggies here just a little bit. I am firmly of the belief that the SEC will get 2 playoff teams this year, and I am still of the belief that it's easier to be that second team as a non-division winner than it is to be an SEC runner-up, a team that loses in the SEC championship game. Just keep that in mind when it comes to Texas A&M, and we'll follow that story and see where it goes. A couple of other SEC through items to get to. One was a very busy week in the SEC weekend this past Saturday. LSU is in a rough situation right now, having lost at Missouri. Now, disclaimer here is they found out like 2 days before the game they were going to Columbia when it was originally supposed to be in Baton Rouge. And, now they are 1-2, and the 2 games they've lost, their defense has played terrible. Not a great look for Bo Pelini, who was kind of resurrected a little bit, even brought back to Baton Rouge here. A lot of people are going to make the comparison between what happened with Gene Chizik at Auburn, where that program, could not capitalize on the 2010 national championship. Right now, LSU, I think, is having one of the worst runs as a defending national champion since maybe Auburn back in 2010. I am simply of the belief that Ed Orgeron is not going down like Gene Chizik did. Look, go back prior to last year. LSU was enjoying plenty of success against everybody but Alabama. Last year, they captured lightning in the bottle, have the great Joe Brady year, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, all those guys become an incredible offense. They win the national championship. But even the LSU version of before that title year was still better than it is right now. My guess is LSU at least finds that level of success again. But you better be careful because at least Gene Chizik at Auburn shows you what is possible for how far a defending national champion can fall to the point where he was out of a job there within 2 years. I don't believe that happens to Orgeron, but it's at least a cautionary tale, if nothing else. Couple of other quick points to make here, then we're going to move on. Alabama Ole Miss on Saturday. Obviously, it was a shootout, an interesting tune-up for Alabama ahead of what's going to happen against Georgia on Saturday. The Tide and the Dogs feel like very different teams right now. Here's the only thing I'll say. Or not the only thing I'll say. Here's the thing I'll say for now. I think it's really weird after the game that you hear this talk of, well, maybe they had our defensive signals. I don't know what was going on there. Look, Alabama's not been good defensively for a while. And this year, somehow, it was simply supposed to be better because Dylan Moses was now healthy. Alabama seemingly made a little bit of a deal with the devil a couple of years ago. They did get much more explosive offensively. But the physicality that had defined this program up to that point in time essentially just disappeared around that same time. So I'm not quite sure what you do with all of that. I still think Alabama is a formidable foe for Georgia on Saturday. My expectation is they play much better against Georgia than they did against Ole Miss. I'm sure they'll be fired up to do so. But this is a different kind of Alabama than it used to be. There's just no doubt about that. And then finally, there's this. The Auburn-Arkansas game. First of all, Auburn's got some real problems. This appears to be one of my preseason prognostications I was wrong about. I expected Auburn more from them than what we've gotten from them over the course of the first 3 games. But if you're an Arkansas fan, after being given the toughest schedule maybe anyone's ever gotten, and then in one of the winnable games on that tough schedule, you get completely hosed by an awful officiating call and then a deficient explanation for why the blunder happened on the field, Arkansas fans have every right to be mad about this. I didn't like the comment from Hunter Yurchek, the Arkansas athletic director, essentially towing the company line in defense of the SEC, more so in anger. At a certain point in time, fans want to see people within an institution step up and defend it as opposed to falling in place and falling in line. But Yurchek could have done more to argue publicly on behalf of Arkansas here. I know Sam Pittman's got to be hot. Let me tell you something. He's doing a good job there with the Hogs in Fayetteville, a really good job. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And Here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I want to get back to Georgia and its defense here in a moment, including reacting to something really interesting that John Stinchcomb said a moment ago. Before that, though, I do want to tell you about a really fun thing that's going on at DawgNation.com right now. Obviously, DawgNation is famous for great fans, incredible fan support. Well, one of the things that we're going to do right now is take a look at honoring what we call the ultimate fan, which could be you, by the way. I know many of you probably think you are DawgNation's ultimate fan. Well, if you feel that way, go to the website DawgNation.com and register for your chance to be recognized as the ultimate fan. Somebody's going to win a $500 Kroger gift card, which is a really cool, as we head towards the holidays, everything else, doesn't having a $500 gift card to Kroger is never a bad thing. So your chance to register for your chance to win on that. We've got a couple of weeks to do this. Then there'll be some voting. And then after that, you may be DawgNation's ultimate fan, courtesy of Kroger. But in addition to that, I am really excited about this. One of the things that we had been talking about with Kroger was the idea of doing a little bit of a mask giveaway. And to be completely honest with you, we sort of decided that everybody had a mask. So if we're going to do one, we need to do like the wildest, craziest mask we can come up with. So that's exactly what we've done here, honoring some of the great recent moments in UGA history with our DawgNation Kroger masks. You may have seen some of these. I gave some of these away at the Arkansas game the other day. Here's one from the Rose Bowl. Looking back, for those of you who are listening to radio podcast, it's a photo. It's a DawgNation headline. It's essentially a recreation of the DawgNation story of the big moment. Here's one from the Rose Bowl. Here's one from the takeover at South Bend against Notre Dame back in 2017. Really cool look at the Terry Godwin touchdown on that. How about beating Florida again? We never get tired of that. We've got a mask commemorating Georgia's winning streak against Florida. That's always a lot of fun to see. And we've got one in honor of Georgia's 2017 SEC championship there as well. We're going to be giving away these masks. 50 of the people who register for your chance to win the Ultimate Fan Contest courtesy of Kroger, we're just going to draw your name out. We're going to give you a DawgNation mask. In fact, I've been deputized to do this. I'm going to give away 10 of these here today. So go to DawgNation.com. Go to the Ultimate Fan Contest courtesy of Kroger, register for your chance to win, and before you even get, potentially selected as the Ultimate Fan, you could have your name drawn to win one of these DawgNation masks. Really, really cool stuff. We're going to be giving these away at a lot of places, but the easiest way to win right now is to register for the Ultimate Fan Contest, and you've got a chance to do that courtesy of our friends at Kroger. Does that all make sense? The bottom line is, go to DawgNation.com, click in the tab on that, and it'll all be explained for you. All right, here on our program, let's get back to Georgia defense here for a moment. And I thought that John Stinchcomb said something really interesting just a couple of moments ago. And this is like football player who played in the trenches. This is exactly what you would expect to hear him say. He says, given the choice between what Georgia's currently doing, what Alabama's currently doing, I just like the way that Georgia's playing better. This is, I'm paraphrasing John here, this is the team I want to root for. I like the physicality of the defense as opposed to the arena football style game Alabama played on Saturday against Ole Miss. Now listen, don't get this twisted. I think Alabama's going to be in a bad mood on Saturday to prove that they are more than the humiliating defensive performance against Ole Miss. I think that's going to be a big source of motivation for the Crimson Tide this week. But John is right that the contrast between these two teams right now seems pretty significant. I thought Kirby Smart had some interesting things to say about that when he spoke on Saturday after the game, not about Alabama, but about what he's seeing from his Georgia defense right now. This is Kirby on that.
Well, stands out is they have a camaraderie about them. They take pride in being good, and they don't have a bunch of prima donnas. I mean, everybody puts sweat in the bucket, and there's a lot of guys contributing on defense. So the atmosphere that's created on defense here is just we're not letting them score. We're not going to let them in, and they hold everybody accountable. And hey, they did score today. They scored 2 touchdowns, but at the end of the day, they were really good throws against pretty good corner.
Yeah, I think that's really true in a number of fronts. First of all, Kirby's always been good about getting a lot of guys into games. I think that keeps morale high, but it also sometimes when a defense is that's as deep as Georgia's, maybe it prevents certain guys from becoming as big a superstar as they possibly could be if they were just featured more. And yet what you see from Georgia is guys taking advantage of their moment when it comes. Adam Anderson on Saturday, Azeez Ojulari on Saturday, Monty Rice on Saturday. Guys who get their chance to go out there and make a big play, they do that. And right now they are playing just as intense in like the 58th minute of a blowout game as they're playing in the 3rd or 4th minute in a game that is kind of up for grabs. It is fun to watch right now. As I mentioned to John earlier, they're like a highlight reel, one play after another. I think on the road against Alabama is a really stiff task. I am certainly not going to paint the picture that it's going to be easy, because as bad as Bama's defense was on Saturday, as good as Alabama's offense was, it is a tough group to stop right now. Najee Harris is playing at an incredibly high level. The challenge is real. But my gosh, if you faced a huge challenge, if you faced a tough foe, you couldn't ask for a much better defense to have on your side. It's going to be fun to watch this weekend. I can't wait for it. So as we get ready for that, also don't forget we got a big thing going down midweek here too. Wednesday is decision day for 5-star offensive tackle Amarius Mims. And my, oh my, wasn't it interesting what Mims put out on Twitter here over the course of the last couple of days, especially considering the fact that it's supposed to be, he and Georgia and Tennessee kind of in a battle for Mims right now. So he reaches out to Smile Mondon Jr. and asks what the move is, essentially giving a wink and a nod to the decision that's going to be made there. Smile Mondon comes back with a "just let me know, twin," and obviously he's kind of thinking about that. So we've talked a lot about tandems and pairings in the 2021 class, whether it be, Corey Foreman and Mason Smith, maybe a little bit Xavier Sori and Terry and Arnold. Could Smile Mondon and Amarius Mims also be a package? Who knows? But that's a nice preview of Mims' decision coming up on Wednesday. By the way, Gatorator update, let's give that to you. 1,444 days. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. As I said before, I know we've gone a little long on the show last few days, but appreciate you being here with us for that, and hope you're excited about what happened on Saturday against Tennessee. If not quite perfect, at least pretty thrilling at times. And obviously looking ahead to a gigantic game as you get ready for Alabama coming up on Saturday. So let's talk about all of that. You want to do some of the Mims stuff ahead of the Wednesday decision? We can do that as well. And let me just pull up these comments. Let me go Facebook first. And I'll try not to stay on any particular comment section too long. We'll bounce around here a little bit. By the way, appreciate all of you giving spirited comments as well during our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UJ Bookstore this past Saturday. That was fun to be a part of as well. All right, here we go. Marion Martin Corbin says it's going to be a war on Saturday. And yeah, from a football sense, it really is. I mean, this is what we just, this is what people play in the SEC for. That's why coaches want to coach in the SEC. This is why SEC fans develop such a sense of pride about the school that they root for, is because of games like this. It just feels really big. And in a year in which there just aren't a ton of really big games. The Big 12 is providing none of that. Oklahoma, Texas happened on Saturday. Most people barely even noticed. The Miami-Clemson game, no real sense that game was going to live up to the hype, and it didn't. So you don't get a ton of big games right now. So this is it. Q Nash says, I believe our first 3 games have been good prep for Bama. I don't think Saban can adequately prepare for our defense. I'm weird in one respect, or probably in many respects, but one in particular. I kind of like for my future opponent to play really well the week before it plays Georgia, more so than what happened to Alabama on Saturday. Like, I'd be much more excited about this game on Saturday if Bama had won like 55-10 at Ole Miss, as opposed to the kind of game in which people are rightly going to point out, this Alabama team is just a little soft on defense right now. They're going to be ornery and looking to kind of prove that wrong. So, yeah, in some respects, there are things that Georgia seems to do well that can be exploited against Alabama. But I would also say that Saturday's game is going to be an entity in and of itself that I think the way in which that game unfolds could be not quite predicted maybe by the first 3 weeks' worth of results for either team. Randy Hall says, what's my prediction for Saturday? I'm going to hold off on that right now. I talked a real big game in the summer about Georgia beating Bama twice, and let me just say that I'm going to reserve the right to hold off on my prediction for a few days on that for right now. Barry Watkins says, just go ahead and pack the slingshot and rock and get ready to use it on Saturday in T-Town. Here's the thing about that, though, Barry, and then this I think should be taken as a good thing. Georgia cannot sell itself as David against Goliath on Saturday. That is not what this is. Now, I understand what you're saying because of the way in which Alabama has stood in the way of Georgia, winning at least one national championship and possibly a second if you want to think about 2018. I understand what you're saying on that, but the good news for Georgia is, as a program in terms of talent acquisition, in terms of how it's played against teams other than Alabama, Georgia doesn't get to be David trying to, slingshot Goliath on Saturday. Georgia has worked hard to make this a fair fight, which means the only thing left to do is go out there and win it. So I get the point that you're making, but the national folks aren't going to let you get away with calling this a David versus Goliath matchup, and I think in that case they'd be right to push back on that. This is a fair fight. This is Clash of the Titans. This isn't David versus Goliath, and that's what you want it to be. I think that's good news. Matt Rukavina was only a little bit. He says, I'm a little mad that Stetson's pass was a little late when he didn't put 51 on them. Yeah, a lot of Georgia fans would have liked that. Jared Folletti says, I think Milton and McIntosh need more carries. Love Zeus, but doesn't seem to be running with confidence. Yeah, I knew this was going to be a big topic today, and I'm right there with you on McIntosh and Milton. They both deserve more carries. But I am not there with you and those need to come at the expense of Zamir White. It's the same thing that people would have said about James Cook after Arkansas. You can't have Cook in the game. He shies away from contact. Well, he didn't shy away from contact in the first half of the Auburn game. I didn't realize he got hurt after that. But the Cook that we saw first half of Auburn was better than the Cook we saw against Arkansas. So the people who wanted to bench Cook after Arkansas were doing so prematurely. I would say that Zamir, even though he did not have a very good game against Tennessee on Saturday, he did find the end zone, but didn't have a great game. To say that you now want to see less of him so you can see more of McIntosh and Milton, that might also be a little premature there as well. I mean, Georgia's going to give the ball to multiple running backs. As I said during the show, in 2018, they essentially evenly split carries amongst DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield. And in 2017, it was just a couple carries difference per game between Chubb and Sonny Michel. There's going to be room for a lot of guys to get carries. And Kirby Smart's been one of these guys in the past, too, that sometimes he's favored the veteran over the rookie, and sometimes he's favored the rookie over the veteran. I mean, Brian Harry and Elijah Holyfield in their own way would go on to have really good careers for Georgia. But in 2017, Kirby Smart looked at DeAndre Swift and said, hey, I'm going to give you more carries than I'm giving either of these guys. So Kirby did not necessarily just respect the veteran in 2017, but in other instances, Smart has decided to go with the more experienced player. So I don't think there's any tendency from Smart's past to say, well, he's definitely going to handle this one way or another. I just don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. The one thing, though, to keep in mind when it comes to the veteran presence of a White or a Cook, even though we commonly think of running backs as guys who tote the rock, and that's with good reason, there is still more going on. There's still pass protection. There's still things like that. And part of the reason you may see a White in a game instead of a Milton, and I'm just speculating out loud here, but it might have something to do with some of the other aspects of football beyond just what you do with the football in your hand. But, I mean, this was Zamir who came into the game on Saturday still averaging somewhere in the neighborhood of, 4.5 yards a carry. That's not a bad average. It's not great, but it's not bad. So, on Saturday, I expect Zamir White to still be a huge part of the formula for Georgia. And if he didn't play on Saturday, I'd be disappointed. Do I want to see more of Kendall Milton after that Hercules act he pulled? I mean, go back and watch the slow motion replay of what looks like a gang tackle on Milton, and then he all of a sudden is just slinging guys off of him. It looks like me playing in the backyard with my kids. He's just slinging them off and moving forward. Of course you want to see more of Milton after he did that. When you see Kenny McIntosh, that burst he gets on those kick returns, of course you're wondering, what does that look like if you do more of that at the tailback spot? Of course you're wondering about that right now. I think it's possible to want to see as much of Milton McIntosh as you can without saying, I've seen enough to know I want to see less of Zamir White. I'm with you on the one. I want to see more of Milton. I want to see more of McIntosh. But I sell stock slowly. I didn't sell stock on James Cook after week 1, and I'm not selling stock on Zamir White right now after week 3. I think this is an interesting competition. There's plenty of carries to go around. Not for everybody, but for a lot of these guys. And I would say that entire conversation is going to be ongoing. A couple of more. Somebody says, we're not saying bench anybody, just give somebody a few more touches. That's Robert Barnes who says that. And we may see some of that for sure. Jeff Hensley says, if Milton and Matt get more carries, it will fire Zeus up. But it very well might. Richard Pollard says, let's be honest, what has Zeus done for us to be high on him in college? I think he's been good, not great. I think he's been solid, not spectacular. But, for an offense last year for Georgia that really struggled, I think that good and solid is not nothing, to use a double negative. But, pretty clearly, I would say it's fair to say that the, human highlight reel that he was as a, high school running back, nation's number one back of the 2018 class, thus far in college hasn't quite been that yet for him. I think that's totally fair. I don't think that's unfair. Zeus himself may even say that. Let me go over to YouTube for a moment. I promise I'll come back to Facebook before we're done, but the YouTube people will be. And of course, we appreciate R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you. We are coming on that time where you're going to start using that furnace, that heating system. If you're worried that yours might not be ready for the winter that's on its way, well, get some peace of mind here by getting your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Okay, over here on YouTube for a moment. David Jackson feeling pretty good. The Nature Gator says, if Stetson Bennett struggles, who comes in to replace him? Is it Daniels? Is it Mathis? As it stands right now, I believe that Dwan Mathis is still the backup quarterback for this team. Where does that leave JT Daniels? I honestly don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if Kirby was making Daniels sound healthier than he really was when he cleared him a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago. If Daniels is waiting in the wings and they're just ready to spring him at some point in time, I really don't know. But I think for right now, this is Stetson Bennett's team because of, first of all, the fact that Bennett, when he's played, has played pretty effectively, and also because I don't quite get the sense that JT Daniels is just like a millimeter away from stepping in and doing big things for Georgia. For one reason or another, I just don't quite know that Daniels is truly there. I think it's been a very odd tenure for Daniels in a Georgia uniform thus far in terms of, some of the stuff that we've heard, not quite matching it with reality sometimes. I don't quite know what to make of all that necessarily, but I would be very surprised if we don't hear from Daniels at some point in time this year. But if I had to guess, my best guess is, as of right now, is that Daniels doesn't play against Alabama either. Now, Stetson Bennett, for the most part, by the way that he's playing right now, isn't giving much of a window for another quarterback to come in and play. Bennett, as I said before, was 8.8 yards per attempt against Tennessee. He had been 9.6 yards per attempt against Georgia. For the people who follow QBR and stuff like that, Bennett's numbers are really, really good. I don't mention quarterback rating stuff too much on the show because I try not to mention a stat on the show that I can't explain or draw up, a formula for in the back of a cocktail napkin. Quarterback rating is over my head, so I don't usually mention that stat very much, but Bennett rates really high when it comes to QBR and stuff like that. Other stats matter more to me, and Bennett's at least pretty good in some of those. So, Bennett is playing well right now. Is he ready to go beat Alabama on the road? Well, Bama's only lost twice at home since 2015. So there are a lot of quarterbacks who haven't been quite ready for that task. When their number was called to do so. But if Bennett does struggle against Tuscaloosa, let's just hypothetically mention that. If Bennett struggles, I don't believe that JT Daniels is going to step in and save the day. I just don't. My assumption is right now that he's not quite ready to do that for whatever reason. But I'll be just as wide-eyed as all of you to find out what happens in the event that does occur. Bank 6 says that Jake Camarda can be the X factor in flipping the field. Boy, he flipped it once on Saturday, at least once. He's always had the big leg. It's one of the reasons why I've always been a believer that Camarda could be a great punter at Georgia at a time in which early in his career maybe he was trying to work on some of that touch and preventing touchbacks sometimes when he didn't want one. But you always knew he had the potential to be a great punter because it's easy, I think, to develop control, but some guys just don't have enough leg. Well, Camarda always had enough leg, and yeah, he's showing that now. He really boomed at least one on Saturday. For some reason, there's one that's coming to mind more for me than the other. Anything else, 60-something yards, something like that. So yeah, I mean, I know people laugh when I say this. If you gave me the choice of an All-American punter, an All-American kicker, I want an All-American punter. I don't want to punt very much, but when I do punt, I want to get the ball out of there. I want to put it way down there, and Camarda's good at that. Crow King 123 says, keep bashing Bennett, please. It feeds us. I don't know if anybody in the comment section is bashing Bennett. I mean, I don't know how you could. He's played really well. Skull already says the Georgia defense has been beaten every game deep. Auburn just didn't he says ain't had a quarterback. Yeah, I mean, there have been some opportunities for some big plays, things like that. No one's going to deny that. I think the one problem that non-Georgia fans ought to be able to have with this Georgia defense right now is that it's really hard to pitch a total shutout in terms of allowing big plays. Arkansas had one. I'm not going to count the Tennessee touchdown on Saturday because that's a short field. I mean, Garantano made a nice throw, but the Georgia defense got rushed back out there on a quick change in a short field. I'm certainly not going to, ask them to apologize for that. But here's the problem you have with the Georgia defense right now. For the big play they give up, they're creating 3 or 4 big plays of their own right now. This is not last year's Georgia defense that was conservative and careful and, hey, we're going to play contain and we're going to, we're limit big plays, nothing, don't get beat deep. This Georgia defense swings for the fences a lot more, and that's a problem, y'all. If you're not a Georgia fan, that's a problem for you because all of a sudden now you're not trying to just match your big plays with Georgia's big plays offensively. You're trying to match your big plays offensively with Georgia's big plays defensively. The impactful moments for Georgia don't just happen when it's offense on the field. It happens also when it's defense on the field. This is a Georgia defense that is looking to score, in other words. That's a problem. That's a problem for opposition. Drew Odom says that Stevenson was blitzing all afternoon. He was, at least a couple of times that I saw for sure. That was one of those things last year that when Tyreek wasn't playing a lot in the beginning of the season, I think he was getting a little frustrated. Stevenson even admitted that in the SEC championship, some of those moments we got a chance to speak to him. He was a little unhappy he wasn't playing more at the beginning of the year. Georgia was deep defensively last year too, so they had to find a role for him to just get him involved, and so they let him be a corner blitzer. I think he's really taken to that because, he's a big enough, guy. He can pack a little bit of a wallop, and corner blitzes are hard to pick up. Funny line from William Perry in the YouTube comment section. Michael Porter says, hopefully the defense gets better each game. Yeah, I hope so. By the way, it's getting late here. We're going to get off the air in a second. Memphis Dog says it was great to see Monty Rice score. It really was. Really was. That's fun to be able to see. Jay Shapes. Some of y'all are funny. Mike D says if we can't convert 4th and inches anywhere on the field, then it's going to be points left that Bama can probably pick up. Yeah, I understand that. I wrote this in the forum during the game on Saturday that, you want to make that be kind of a this year problem for Georgia because of the changeover of the offensive line, because DeAndre Swift's not here anymore. But the truth is that Georgia in those really short yard situations has actually not been great the last couple of years. According to Football Outsiders, which has a stat it calls power success rate, the number of 3rd and 4th downs of 2 yards or less that get converted for a first down or a touchdown, Georgia was just 40th in the country last year, just 33rd in 2018. That's 2 really good offensive lines, 2 really good running backs. But for some reason, those really short line situations or short yardage situations have not been a Georgia opportunity to thrive the last couple of years. So what Georgia did on Saturday on those couple 4th downs is in keeping with what Georgia's done in short yardage situations for a while. Go back to 2018 when Georgia had all those goal line issues and its sort of, red zone offense. Same kind of thing. Georgia has not been great in short yardage situations, even though they've typically had good running backs and typically had a really good offensive line. Brian McPhail says, let Jalen Carter carry the rock on 4th and 1. You trying to turn him into Charles Grant? By the way, not that I'm going to toot my own horn and pat myself in the back, But I did say in the space, I believe it was exactly a week ago, that Georgia would eventually throw out of that power set. I did say that, and that's what they did on Saturday to the tune of a touchdown.
One quick thing that I saw this weekend, this is courtesy of Scott Van Pelt Sports Center Saturday night. I was watching that after the game. And since the start of the 2019 season, Georgia is 1 for 7 on 4th and a yard or less. That is the worst in the country at that rate.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it doesn't make a lot of sense, but in one respect it does. I mean, Kirby even said this near the end of the game. There were like 10 Tennessee defenders in the box, that when the other team really knows what you're going to do, it is easier to defend. Georgia has had good offensive lines, had good running games, not quite as good, at least in terms of the running game a year ago. But it is kind of interesting. Those short yardage situations just have not been a strength for Georgia.
Right, yeah. I wonder if we start to see them, in line with what they did with Jalen Carter, get a little bit more creative in those short yardage situations.
Yeah, the best NFL teams are the ones that throw out of those power sets. And when you go back and look at the red zone struggles that Georgia had in 2018, a lot of the smart people say they were just not creative enough with how they ran their red zone offense. That may not be a problem this year. By the way, somebody mentioned Jalen Carter. Connor had a good story on Carter the other day at DawgNation.com. And for those of you who are longtime viewers, you know my infatuation with football players who dunk, like highlight films of football players dunking basketballs. When Connor asked Kirby about what impressed him about Jalen Carter, Kirby mentioned him also dunking a basketball too, which I thought was pretty cool all the way around there. All right, we got to get ready to go. Justin Sisk mentioned Channing Tindall coming in with 2 sacks. Yeah, great to see that for him, getting a spot to go. I think that Tindall can play. It's just a deep defense right now. Al Chandler says he's like a refrigerator Perry Jr. Maybe so. Maybe so. I tell you, he's a good player, man. He's a good player. He can do a lot of stuff really, really well. Glenn Rubin says it's the play calling being so predictable that keeps the conversions on 4th and 1 with 9 in the box. Yeah, but, if Georgia, threw it on 4th and 1, people would complain about that too. I understand what you're saying. Predictable makes it easier to stop, but, people would complain if they did something less predictable too, because why aren't you just lining up and running? It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. By the way, I'll also say this. I was totally in favor of Kirby going forward on both of the 4th downs on Saturday. I said this during the forum during the game. I have screamed for years that Georgia's just not aggressive enough. So even if it was the wrong call, I've got no leg to stand on, because I've been in that forum every single game for years saying, hey, when you have a chance to go forward on 4th down, you should. Here's what I'll say really quickly, and we've just gone super long here. When you have a great defense, that doesn't mean you should play more conservative. That's a permission to play more aggressive. Now, they did turn around and score on a short field. I'll grant you that. But when you have a great defense, you shouldn't be afraid of putting them on a short field, because they're a great defense. A great defense isn't an excuse to be more conservative. It's permission to be more aggressive. When you're the better team, better players, better athletes, you should be forcing the issue as much as you can, playing really fast, playing really aggressive. That's what the opposing team doesn't want. They like it when Georgia slows down. They like it when Georgia plays conservative, because it just gives them a chance. Even when it doesn't work, and sometimes it's called aggressive for a reason, because it might not work. But I had no problem with either of Kirby's 4th down attempts on Saturday, although I know commonly people will criticize that. All right, one more before we go, or 2 more maybe. Matt Rukavina, thanks for being here. Robert Barnes says, what happened with going over the top? I know Zamir tried to go over the top on one run near the goal line in the second half. Didn't quite get there. But, yeah, that's also an option as well. Craig Hill says, have Carter take the snap under center. I know that Auburn's got, is it Pegas, is that how you say his name, the tight end? That's a pretty athletic big guy. He had a move on Saturday where he's like spinning and doing all this kind of stuff. In a day in which Auburn didn't have very many highlights, the Pegas run was kind of a pretty good one. Maybe Georgia can, see that and raise that with a Jalen Carter snap at some point in time. But the problem here is, and listen, I love Coach Donnan, but when they tried Charles Grant enough at running back, he eventually got hurt playing running back. So maybe you got to be careful not being, too aggressive with Carter out there, because that is a way to get somebody hurt every now and then. And Georgia's going to need him on that defensive line for years to come. All right, we've got to get ready. This is getting obnoxious. And, somebody mentioned the defensive line getting involved in offense. It's got to help recruiting, right? I mean, guys love scoring touchdowns. That's one of the reasons why, Logan Stackhouse were so excited. Now, they can't be running on the field and celebrating, but that's one of the reasons why they're so excited. Defensive linemen want to get some glory. Bart Brinkley says, why don't we see any toss sweep plays? Bart, who's right there with you on that, and I don't think he's in the comment section today, but a lot of times he is. The great former Georgia tight end Troy Sadowski, who was a great blocker. He's an All-American for Georgia in '88. Great blocker on some toss sweep plays. He wants to see that back in the Georgia offense. So our buddy Troy Sadowski will be right there with you on that. Frank Patterson likes that too. Darth Flyer, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. GB2 says, do we get a big running play on Saturday? Boy, I hope so. Nature Gator talking trash to the Hurricanes. I don't know if Dennis Wilson's here to take that or not. All right, we got to go. Listen, huge thanks to everyone for being a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Let me also say to check out AJC.com, Atlanta News Now. Couple of big fronts here. Braves, tonight, NLCS Game 1 from Arlington. A great coverage of that at AJC.com. Also, as you slept last night, for those of you in the Atlanta area, Falcons dropped the axe on head coach Dan Quinn, who, try this on for size. Dan Quinn, Florida defensive coordinator. What do you think about that? Just consider that as a possibility. But Quinn is gone as Falcons coach, and Thomas Dimitrov is gone as Falcons general manager. Good coverage of that online, AJC.com for your Atlanta News Now. And plus, all the serious stuff going on in the world, too, they've got that for you there as well. Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. Thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you because they've been doing all that for us here at DawgNation for quite a long time. We appreciate them. Check them out online at rsandrews.com. Also, thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.